Hello, my name is Cian Lister, and today I'll be talking about the importance of movement in the elementary school music classroom, splitting it into two categories: the intrinsic value of movement in the elementary school classroom and movement as an aid for other musical learning. So going in order here, movement can be used to help children learn sound concepts, like pulse and meter and phrasing, and pretty much anything in music. It can be used to enhance musical expression through music. And of course, movement can be expressive on its own. There is cultural value in learning dances that can be a part of culturally responsive teaching, and movement, of course, has great significance in many cultures. And of course, there's motor skills. As teachers, one of our responsibilities is to help children develop motor skills, so movement is, of course, necessary in the classroom by that alone. And as an aid for any learning, really, and this includes music, movement in any classroom improves engagement, through novelty, this video would become instantly more engaging if I changed where I was standing, or if I moved the camera. And likewise, children, if they are moved around the room, will have a much easier time focusing on the task at hand. As long as it's moving around every 20 minutes, that'll maximize their engagement through novelty. Through physical energy. Oh, and one quote here, on page 129, or on page 129 of the textbook, it says, "Movement balances the academically passive parts of the school day with the children's characteristically active nature." And that expresses how novelty is important in the classroom and how movement can engage that. And of course, that also applies to physical energy. Children have a lot of physical energy, and of course, movement can be used to vent that for more calm activities throughout the class, or it can be used you can take advantage of that excess energy to engage them in types of learning that require a lot of movement and running around. And then connection between students and between you and your students. A lot of dances and physical activities involve touch, which can be an affiliative behavior. There's mirroring activities you can do where the students mirror you or mirror each other, and that also aids affiliation between students and between you and your students. And of course, participating in a cooperative activity involving movement or dancing can also build the community of the classroom and make kids feel more comfortable. So through novelty, physical energy, and connection between you and your students and between students themselves, this can improve the efficiency and efficacy of a classroom and also help with behavior management in the process. Movement can also help kids learn social, emotional learning by that same token. Connection to each other and participation in the classroom culture and in their own cultures and from cultures around the world can help students build an understanding, an appreciation, and respect for each other. And the last thing about movement as an aid for learning is that it provides an option for assessment. Physically seeing a classroom of students moving around as following instructions is much easier to assess than listening for the same thing. In a choir classroom, it requires either singling kids out or in small sections, or just really, really good ears to hear if one kid is not understanding the musical concept, but it's a lot easier to see that if it's represented through through movement. So if you're trying to assess their understanding of phrasing or pulse, for example, you can easily see if one kid is not nodding along to the pulse, or if another kid is not doing anything phrasing-wise with the movement that they are instructed to do. And this leads into dog rows, which I'll come back to. Okay, so how to apply movement. So if these are all the reasons that movement is important in an elementary school music classroom, how then do you apply it? Let me just change my marker here. This one's running out. Okay, first of all, know your kids. Observe your kids' behavior, take notes. The book even recommends observing your kids at recess, seeing how they move and the amount of energy that they have. Make enough space. Switch markers again. If you're going to be doing a movement activity where kids are moving around the classroom, obviously the chairs need to be out of the way. If there's no option for a large open space for an activity that requires moving around the class, then there can be activities designed with limited space. This is called locomotor versus non-locomotor. Locomotor being activities which require kids to move around the class, and non-locomotor being activities where kids are remaining in place. Once you have an understanding of where your kids are and you have a space to do the activity that you have, or an activity based on the space that you have, it's important to set the tone. So you want to encourage expression and individuality. But also give structure. So that's rules and suggestions. Kids will succeed if they have both something to follow and guidelines and boundaries of what not to do, rather than if they are just told, move expressively with no guidelines. Choose variety of movements. That means both in terms of the way that they're moving, i.e. Moving different body parts or moving in different ways around the class or sitting in place, and also movements and dances from other cultures as part of that cultural responsive teaching. And you might prime in a non-musical way. Warm up. You might instruct the kids to simply move in a certain way without a musical context. So move your arm in a flowy way. Now move your arm in a jagged way. Things like that. And then, of course, once you have these in place, there are plenty of options within pedagogical literature for specific methods you can use. The two I'll talk about today are Kodai and Dalcroze. I put Kodai over here because Kodai, he was a Hungarian ethnomusicologist and educator and musician who was concerned with preserving Hungarian folk culture and folk music. He was working with an ethnomusicologist called Béla Bartók, and their focus was on Hungarian music, but their philosophy and their style of teaching and their model of teaching can be applied to cultures around the world. And so that fits in with the culture category over here. And Dalcroze I put over here because Dalcroze was primarily concerned with how kids can use movement to understand music and the natural sources of musical gestures from natural movements that you can see in children. So starting with Kodai, just around here in my notes. So as I said, folk dances. Folk dance was a big part of Kodai's teaching philosophy. Of course, there's the intrinsic value of the culture, but also it represents an opportunity to engage with music to some extent, or engage with non-movement facets of music. In the Kodai method, it's common to talk about the music first, and then to engage with it. So that's the standard of responding and connecting, and then to performing and eventually composing, creating. And that might take, for example, the form of listening to a song, chanting along to it, moving and chanting, and then moving along to the music. Adding that in at the end. And the Kodai approach most often uses live music, similarly to the Dalcroze approach. Moving on to Dalcroze. Dalcroze is all about expressing what you feel through movement, understanding movement in musical terms, and understanding both music and movement in terms of a story. So it's sort of like a triangle: words plus story. Music and movement. One might create movements to go with a story, create movements to go with music, create music and movement to go with a story, or create any one of these to go with the others. Though, of course, in this context, we're mainly talking about movement representing stories. You could literally tell a story with no musical content and have them move along to it. Music to movement to describe music, where they listen to a piece and represent what they hear in various forms. That could be staccato versus legato, being gliding versus hopping as they move along, so they could do this for legato, and then when they get to the staccato part, hop like that. They could conduct to feel the meter. Teaching them a 4 pattern is really useful to do early on. And they can shape phrases with their arms. And that's all representing music. They could also literally act out a story that you're telling them as a primer, like we were talking about up here with no music, or a musical story and add movements along to it. And that's essentially the simplest way that I could describe the Dahlcroze approach. And again, this is primarily, and especially Dahlcroze, live music over recordings. Recordings can be used, but Dahlcroze emphasizes the importance of the relationship between the music being played and the kids, which can only really happen if the music is being created at the same time as the movement. And this all ties back to assessment at the end. In the Dahlcroze approach, if you are asking the kids to represent something that they hear with their movement, you can assess their listening visually all at once. So this is especially effective if you take video. If you're doing a summative assessment at the end of the year, it's much harder to see all of the students at once and take accurate notes. If you get a video, then you can go through and see, especially if you take a before and after video, like a video at the beginning of the year and a video at the end of the year, then you can see the progress of each individual student. So that can be a way to assess their musical understanding through movement. If you want to assess their understanding of movement itself, you can ask formative questions. Reflections at the end of class and exit tickets and all things of that sort. You can gather these reflections and exit tickets in a portfolio to have a more holistic, comprehensive understanding of the kids' understanding of the music, of the movement rather. And also, of course, it is important to assess their understanding of culture, their motor skills, and their expression in both the musical sense and the movement sense. In conclusion, movement is a vital part of the music classroom, not only for its intrinsic value. Kids must learn to move, kids must learn motor skills and the cultural implications and expressive properties of the movements that they do. And also, movement is important for helping musical learning, as it can represent sound and represent expression in sound, as well as improve the classroom dynamic and engagement and social emotional learning between the students, and it makes assessment easier. Thank you, and have a great day.